It's so nice to meet you all. It's so nice to be here. I want to convey a profound welcome and apologies from Mo Garahan, who's the founder and ED of Just Food, who would so much love to be here with you. She is experiencing a family emergency and is with her own family up in New Liskeard. So I encouraged her not to drive all the way back here tonight in a snowstorm and then drive back to New Liskeard. But I actually have the great pleasure of telling you a little bit about what I think about food and a lot about what Mo thinks about food, because she spent most of the afternoon thinking very carefully about how she wanted to shape this conversation and writing some notes that I'm going to share with you. And Shannon, our colleague at Just Food, who's right here, has prepared some beautiful images of the kind of community-based food work that Just Food does to kind of illustrate what we're talking about, and I hope also inspire you in the cold of February and maybe be a bit of a balm to your soul that spring and summer will come again. I want to say thank you, Chimigwech Monique. It was really an honor and a pleasure to hear your teaching tonight, and I think it really set the tone for all of us in our conversation. Thanks. I found, listening to you and also listening to the other people who I had a chance to have a little bit of conversation with, I became so clear to me so quickly how much expertise there is in this room, far beyond mine or that of any one person. When we put our ideas together, when we collaborate, I think we can build something greater. And the thing I think about the topic of food is that always everybody in the room has some expertise, right? Because everybody eats. And especially in the context of the pandemic, we have all experienced the instability and insecurity of being reliant on global supply chains for our food. And that may be what motivates some of you to be here today. I know that some of that is like, it survives by being invisible, right? And the pandemic made some of that stuff visible. And so now the question is, what are we going to do about it? Farmers, coast to coast to coast, make up under 2% of our population. Our food has been turned into waste in our communities. These are just some of the kinds of issues that are affecting all of us who live here in Algonquin Territories, Ottawa. And we know that not all communities experience food insecurity in the same way. So the same problem can mean, the same pattern can mean different challenges and different troubles for people in different places in our community. So we know that our food systems need to thoroughly change to preserve human and planetary health. But change how? One of the things we want to suggest is that each community has the right to define the priorities of its own community. That's our work here in Algonquin Territories, Ottawa, is to make space for our community writ large, but also for the communities that make up our community to think and talk together about what they need to be healthy and balanced and in right relationship with one another and with the planet. So our conversations, the conversations that we're having here tonight are going to be joined by a lot of what we're calling kitchen table talks throughout Ottawa over the next year to build a new food strategy. A food strategy is an approved plan that helps community-level governments and communities integrate solutions to a whole spectrum of food systems issues. You can tell I talk with my hands, and like, so I have a microphone and I have the papers, and I guess I'll talk with my elbows tonight. In our case here in Ottawa, what that means is that Just Food is interested in a food strategy that has action from municipal government and the NCC, and schools, and businesses, and community groups, and neighborhoods, and individuals. Food strategies are about integrating, coordinating, and fundamentally transforming food systems at our local levels so that we can reach our shared goals of equity, community food resilience, and sustainability. That means everybody who eats has enough to eat of the things that they want to eat so that they can build meaningful lives and be in right relationships with the people that they love and with the place that they love. To me, that's what a just, sustainable food system looks like. The thing about food strategies is that they're more than simple reports or a set of recommendations. They constantly change and they constantly evolve, but the most important part is that they're about action. They're about the things that we're going to do together, not the things that we just say to each other. I mean, I like saying things, but it's the doing things that counts. So tonight we're going to talk about 3 important sets of things, and if it's all right with you, Spencer and I are going to swap. I'm going to talk about land access. Spencer is going to talk about transforming food banking to community food solutions, so food access. And also we're going to talk about transforming food waste into food assets. But there's a lot more than that that needs to be discussed, and y'all have a lot of expertise. So we also hope that you'll take advantage of the infinite sticky notes and pens and pieces of paper that are around here to jot down your own ideas so that we can capture them. We have one ideas board over there, but actually anything here can be an ideas board, right? You can put your sticky notes on a pillar, you can stick your sticky notes to the table in your discussion group, and we're going to come around and capture them because this is the beginning of building a food strategy. So then, Mo wants me to say a lot about land access, and I want to leave time for the other people. So I'm doing that next gen thing using my phone to check the time. Excuse me. In the experience and from the perspective of just food, we want a world that gets to looking like this. So when we think about land access, there are 4 things that we want to put on the table for our conversation tonight. And they are, 1, the importance of preserving fertile soil. 2, the importance of equitable distribution of land. 3, the importance of affordable access to land. And 4, the value of prioritizing an edible landscape. And there's really interesting work happening about that here in Ottawa. So I'm going to say a little bit about what each of those things means to just food, and hopefully that will spark some ideas and some possibilities. The first thing is to talk about actually preserving soil that is fertile. And Spencer and I were having a conversation that touched on this before we started tonight, because I'm one of those kids who grew up north of Toronto, between Toronto and Barrie, in the beautiful countryside of Tecumseh Township, near the Holland Marsh. And seeing the beautiful, fertile, rural hills really means a lot to my heart. And actually, I can't go home again. Not only because it breaks my heart, but because most of it is gone. And so what I'm used to recognizing as the beautiful rolling hills is now like the enormous parking lots of Vaughan Mills and the non-fertile soil that's been built in subdivisions to replace what was agricultural land. And that's not so different from the reality we have here in Ottawa. Our green belt, but we have opportunities, right? Ottawa has an opportunity that most other national capitals in the world don't have, which is that we have a green belt with 10,000 acres in total on it. 25% of that is agricultural land. So it's an opportunity and a challenge, because while there have been some positive trends toward creating local producing farms, we haven't yet been able to transform the green belt back into a commons. So what does it mean to find land that's for farmers and gardeners, for the people who want to grow food? How do we make those thousands of acres helpful to feeding our city in the ways that it wants to be fed? As Mo says, this is Mo, we don't need corn and soy for export to be grown within city boundaries. In a city of 1 million people with a population plan to grow, we need food for people to be grown here as a priority. So when we think about the second point, we need equitable distribution of land. I mean, to have that conversation means starting from the acknowledgement of the power of racism and colonialism and how they have shaped what our lands are, how they look, who lives on them, both human and non-human beings. All of those beings have changed because of that process. And so we need to be prepared to ask ourselves questions like, whose land is this? Who is given resources? Who is recognized as capable? Whose skills and knowledge count? And if we can start to think about those questions, then that might help us see into different ways of doing things. And we can work towards things like land back. So, for example, at Just Food, we're trying out ways for this to work in our community and working cooperatively with the Wabano Indigenous Food Sovereignty Project, who are stewarding their own land just adjacent to the Just Food community farm. It's an opportunity for some relationship building and sorting out together how to be allies. Just Food also has a commons project, so 1/16 of an acre per family, so families can work together to think about how to grow their own food. That's food they want to eat. And this is based on and draws from the allotment garden model, which some of you might be familiar with from Europe. For a while I had an allotment garden in High Park, and it was really life-giving to see how people were doing the generational passing on of food growing processes. And literally thousands of people want to grow food in Ottawa. There are waiting lists for community gardens everywhere. I was talking tonight before we started to a new Canadian who arrives with extensive growing experience and can't find access to land that will allow him. In fact, I talked to a couple of people in the situation who can't find access to land that would allow them to grow in a meaningful way. So we need to think about that. But it's not just having access to land, it's not just that, it's also that accessing land is unaffordable. We need more places where people can access land to grow. And this is where we're talking about community farms. We're talking about new and collaborative approaches to land development. But also we want to ask questions of the institutions within our communities about how they steward and think about the lands upon which they are built and the communities whom they serve. For example, what about school grounds? What about hospital grounds? What about the lands that all those healthcare and long-term care facilities are built on? What if every school, long-term care facility, group home, and hospital that had some land had a farmer tied to it who would grow fresh food for that facility? And for those without land, what if public land was made available for those institutions to grow some food that they needed? If you think about the broad health benefits that something like that would have, food, activity, the opportunity to participate in growing food, the direct connection with the natural world. We know those things have really important benefits for the physical and mental and emotional health of every one of us. It can make a big difference. Finally, we need to prioritize an edible landscape. And Mo says, we can plan a community where children know what herbs and berries to pick and eat as they walk to school, where children and youth don't graduate without knowing how to harvest and process food. I've been that person working with students in a community garden and helped them understand that it really was safe to eat a carrot that was pulled from the ground, that it wasn't dangerous, it wasn't germy, it was okay. You don't have to be afraid of the watermelon that you just pulled out of the garden. We're not going to put it in the compost. I'm going to get a knife and you're going to try it. But they had never had that experience before of eating food that had been grown directly, and it is transformative. So we want this kind of opportunity for people all across the city where we have urban bees, this is Mo again, where we have urban bees and hens like so many other communities with rules that ensure health, sanitation, and good relations across neighbors, where our tree canopy projects, both at organizational levels and municipal levels, require a large percentage of planted trees to be edible trees. I just am arranging to plant a memorial tree for my father, who's in the late stages of dementia. And he grew up on a fruit farm in the Niagara region. And I would love to plant a peach tree for him in the city of Ottawa, but the closest we could get was a sugar maple. So one food tree that we could find on the permitted list, right? But what if we had not only birch and maple for sap, nut trees, fruit trees like apple, pear, and pawpaw, blueberries, strawberries, gooseberries, Saskatoon berries, blackberries. we could have an edible landscape for decades to come while also mitigating climate change. This community has the land, the people, the interests, the skills. I mean, here you are. The only thing preventing this is our collective will. So we can change this together. We need to. And what we hope is that this conversation will be the beginning of sparking some of those larger transformative conversations.